Here's your 3 minutes of time crafting for March 1st, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. One of the things that I've discovered as a coach of productivity and time management is the need for accountability. And the funny thing is that the way my coaching programs have been designed, there's either the single sessions or you could do 90-day, 30-day programs or 120-day programs, is accountability is the part that needs to be worked on. And to be fair, I've struggled with that as well. I've struggled with not only being the person that receives accountability, but also being, giving it when it's necessary. And the interesting thing that I want to focus on today is the idea of when you need accountability is based on a lot on mindset. Like if you're trying to make a change and you need that consistent, effort and attention to detail to make sure that that change takes hold, then I think it's important that you get accountability and feedback as often as possible, as consistently as possible. I was in a mastermind call with my friends Courtney Carver and Mark and Angel Chernoff and Carl Staben. We were talking about this idea that Melissa Hartwig, who runs the Whole 30, in January of 2019, she did what was called a text nudge program, where basically daily texts would be sent out. And we see this with emails too, like the Daily Stoic, that were kind of nudges or reminders. Hey, you know what? I know you want to, for example, live the Whole 30 lifestyle, or I know you want to live the Stoic life. Here's a reminder. Here's a nudge. Here's a subtle reminder. Here's a trigger to get you back to that place. And it's tough, when you, whether it's for professional or personal stuff, whether it's personal productivity or relationship stuff or whatever, if you're trying to make changes to make things better, and it's either radical or a departure from what you're used to doing, accountability can be a huge thing. And you can be accountable to yourself. You can use reminders on your own. You can put things in a task app that will remind you. You can journal, all of those things, so you can have some accountability. Because remember that if you can't find someone externally, then you can always rely on the person that was in that moment when you realized you needed it, your past self, to kind of inform your future self, so that way you can see your way forward and hopefully adopt that mindset. Why do I bring this up? Well, because through my work, I've realized that I need to do this more, and that's why I've started the membership site, Total TimeCrafting. Because coaching is great, but to have something that's constant and a consistent pursuit of productivity, that's why I built that. It was more that than anything else. So I encourage you to check out Total TimeCrafting as well. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. That's it for this episode of 3 Minutes of Time Crafting. I'm Mike Vardy. For March 2nd, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. Minimalism, that buzzword that's basically been around for a few years, but it's almost back in the news at every turn of the calendar from the previous year to the new one. Spring cleaning often brings that back into the equation too. And as we head into the month of March, I'm sure that that's starting to come to the forefront for you as well. But this idea of minimalism is very personal, and I want to make sure that I drive that point home. I am not a minimalist in the sense that it is defined as by the media, let's say. People, when we're describing things like minimalism, or even productivity to a sense. I mean, productivity often is referred to as like efficiency and effectiveness, where I believe it's initially intention plus attention, and then those other things come later. Minimalism is not getting rid of as much stuff as possible and having, less stuff. It's about being, again, more intentional with the things that you have, whether they're physical or digital or emotional or whatever. It's about having purpose for all of those things. And I think that gets lost in the shuffle, especially with all the noise. There's a book called The Information Diet that I've looked to, and Cal Newport's book, Digital Minimalism. I had him on the Productivityist podcast to talk about it. This idea, this philosophy that, it's not about having less. It's about having a reasonable amount that makes sense for you. I'll give you an example of digital minimalism for me, which I talked about on the show, is the idea that, hey, I am going to, when I share something on Facebook, I'm going to use the iOS extensions or the Chrome, like the extensions in Chrome or whatever. I'm going to share without going into Facebook. I'm going to post to the page without going into Facebook, actually. Sure, I can't schedule it, so I have to be deliberate about it. But I do that. And that way I get something shared and then I get out and I don't even have to land on the page. So I think that there's when you're thinking about minimalism and you're doing these things that are like, Marie Kondo and the KonMari method and, trying to minimize, don't think about it as getting rid of stuff to be a minimalist. Think about it as, what stuff do I want to keep? What stuff's intentional? Work from that angle, right? Work from what is the minimum that I need and then expand upon that, as opposed to, just slowly frittering away until you have, less stuff, because less stuff doesn't necessarily mean better. It just means less. So you have to kind of have that reasonable approach, right? So keep that in mind when you're adopting a minimalist lifestyle or you're looking at minimalism. Minimalism is very personal. So keep that in mind, just like productivity. That's it for this episode of 3 Minutes of Time Crafting. I hope you're enjoying the show. Here's your 3 minutes of time crafting for March 3rd, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. I'm going to get a little bit tactical today, and I'm going to get tactical in reference to TimeCrafting, which is the productivity philosophy and methodology that I teach. And there's an element that I haven't talked about very much in blog posts or even really in training. It doesn't come up nearly as often as I would expect. It should come up more now that I've got Total TimeCrafting going on with the core members that are the pioneering members, so to speak, of that community. But it's this idea of the weekly sprint. Now, what do I mean by a weekly sprint? Well, a weekly sprint would be something that you give your overarching focus to over the course of an entire week. It's usually a project. So, for example, I was working on a video course, and if I want to really sprint and get from start to finish in a quick amount of time, that's where a weekly sprint comes into play. If I'm looking for something that's going to take more time and I know I can't finish it in a week, or I don't have the resources or availability to do it in just a 1 week time span, that's where a monthly theme would come into play. So let me give you an example. If I'm making, let's say, March my month to focus on digital programs, which would be courses and all that stuff, which is actually what March is related to, because I'm focusing on the Total TimeCrafting community. So actually it's much broader than that. If I decide that I want to finish one very particular course during that time, and I make a weekly sprint for that very particular course, that overrides, hopefully it complements too, but it overrides the monthly theme. So that would be an example of how a weekly sprint works. So when you start your day, and if you're doing daily theming as well, and let's say Monday for me is my optimization day, I'm going to look at my optimization tasks, but then I'm going to ask myself, well, do I have a weekly sprint this week? Yes, I do. Okay, great. What are all my optimization tasks that live inside of that weekly sprint? Oh, there's 3 or 4. Great. Let me work on those. And then I have a choice. Do I want to continue looking at optimization tasks on my list overarchingly, or do I want to just say, oh, you know what, I'm going to dive into project-based work and dig right into this weekly sprint project that I'm putting on? It's allowing you to kind of filter your focus on a very specific objective. And that's why weekly sprints work. If you are a multi-potentialite, like Emily Wapnick talks about in How to Be Everything, you might not want to do monthly themes at all. You might want to just do weekly sprints and have 52 of them if that's the way you want to run it, or just have no monthly themes and have occasional weekly sprints. So weekly sprints don't have to be in conjunction with monthly themes. They can stand alone on their own and work to help you get objectives done from start to finish quickly and simply. Not so easily, though. That's it for your 3 minutes of time crafting. I'm Mike Vardy. We'll see you later. Here's your 3 minutes of time crafting for March 4th, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. Today is the first in a series of 5 episodes where I'm going to talk about the idea of mode-based work and break down each category of mode-based work for you in 3 minutes or less. Clearly, I'm going to break this down in less than 3 minutes today, because I'm going to talk about the first one. And the first category of mode-based work is theme-based modes. So I've talked about theming your days and theming your time, and this is where theme-based modes come in. So when you are trying to categorize your tasks on your to-do list, you can use a tag that represents your daily theme. So for example, I have a learning day. I will tag tasks in Todoist, Asana, wherever, or again on paper with the tag learning. And so if I'm using a theme-based mode to identify what tasks I should be doing, I will just look at the learning tag or label and see all the tasks that I need to do on that given day. Usually it falls into the theme day, and say, okay, this is what I need to work on. It allows me to filter my focus from the much larger to-do list that just keeps expanding and expanding, probably faster than I can complete it, and then allows me to filter my focus down to the objectives and the tasks that I want to work on that particular day. So if you are theming your days, which is where you'd be using a calendar, this is a nice complement to that, because some people are driven by their to-do list and some people are driven by their calendar, especially people who have put their tasks on their calendar in the past, which is not something I generally recommend. That said, when you theme your days and you have horizontal themes and things like that, you're kind of putting your tasks on your calendar. You're just giving a larger blanket in which those tasks kind of fall into. So again, I wake up Thursday morning. I say, what day is it? I don't ask any other questions like, what am I going to do today? It's, what day is it? Oh, it's Thursday. What is Thursday? Thursday's learning day. Great. What learning tasks am I going to do today? And then because I've tagged and labeled these tasks as such, I can then easily identify them inside of my to-do list. And now all of a sudden I've got the details of the day all lined up. So theme-based modes are kind of the gateway if you're a calendar person, or if you've been daily theming already and you want to kind of move those into your to-do list and have a better way to filter your to-do list. This is where theme-based modes can really help. And honestly, it could be the category of mode that you use the most. And it's one that I tend to use more often than any other, because I do look at my theme days and I use those as kind of like the springboard for my activity on any given day. So again, theme-based modes are based on the themes that you have, whether they're daily themes or horizontal themes. So that way, when that time period comes, whether it's the day of the week or the hour of the day, your brain knows exactly where to go to and can start to work on those tasks and get them from beginning to end and make small steps forward every time you do it. Here's your 3 minutes of time crafting for March 5th, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. See, 3 minutes or less. It was right on the 3-minute edge yesterday's episode where I had to end right at 3 minutes. So today we're going to get right into the second category. But first, again, the first category of mode-based work, theme-based modes. The second category are resource-based modes. And to kind of wrap your head around these quickly, in the simplest of terms, they are person, places, things. So if you know that you need to talk to certain people or a task is related to a certain person, this is where you might want to indicate that they are a resource. So if you have meetings with your boss, you might want to have boss as a label or tag. And that way, instead of constantly emailing your boss or, having these tasks kind of scattered, you can gather them up. And then when you go into your meeting with your boss, you can just look at that label or that tag or wherever you're indicating this on paper. And you can say, hey, look, here are all the tasks, all the things I need to talk to you about. You could do this also with family. I do this with my kids. If there's certain things I need to talk to my daughter about, I've got that tag. So I can look at it, I can filter my focus down to her. Same thing with my wife. Same thing with my son. It sounds probably a little bit clinical to some people, but what it does is it allows me to group all those things together, and then I can, add things as needed and complete them as I go. And it really can be very effective with people, especially. Now, if you're working with not necessarily names, but roles, so boss, CEO, or departments, you might not want to use names. You might want to use the names of the departments or the role, just in case there's turnover or something like that. The other thing, of course, are places. So, what can you do on the resource of an airplane? Let's say, what can I do when I'm on an airplane? And you have all of those tasks listed. What can I do when I'm at home? What can I do when I'm in the office? What can I do when I'm on the road? All of those things can be resources. And finally, things. So, again, Microsoft Word. What can you do when you're in Microsoft Word? What can you do when you are using, you've got bills? Well, I'm going to use Expensify. What can you do when you're inside of Evernote? I'm going into Evernote now. What can I do in there? I'm going into Google Drive right now. Let me look at all the things I can do in Drive. Again, working by mode allows you to get into the state of flow and stay in flow a lot easier because you're not task switching as much. So you're moving things forward by modality instead of by project, which can be far more effective. And it's a different way to work. And it's actually the way our brains tend to operate anyways, by modality than by project. I also want you to keep in mind, and this is something that's kind of interesting, is that if you use personal Gmail and Outlook at work, those are places, those are things. So they all fit into this bucket of resource-based modes. So if you're if you tend to be driven by, hey, what do I have at my disposal right now? This is a good mode to use. That's it for your 3 minutes of time crafting for today. I'll be back tomorrow with another episode in the series.
3 minutes
of
later.
time crafting for March 6th, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. So today I want to talk about the third category of mode-based work. But again, we've talked about theme-based modes and resource-based modes. Now we're going to talk about energy-based modes. And this one is one that I like to use for a number of reasons. First off, energy often allows you to give more attention to things. So if you have high energy, you can give a greater deal of attention and focus to your tasks, where if you have low energy, not so much. And I don't think we use our energy levels as kind of indicators of what tasks we should be doing at any given time, largely because we just don't take time to sit back and go, okay, how am I feeling right now? So what you can do with this kind of category of mode is you can look at your task list and go, okay, how much energy is going to be required to do this task? And you can either indicate it with a tag or a label, and you can use different ones like high energy, full focus, prime time. And if it's low energy, you can do things like low energy, shallow work, brain dead tasks. Some people like to do that. Whatever resonates with you. I've talked about the importance of having words resonate with you. So the other thing you can do is, if you're doing this on paper, instead of doing tags or labels, just put an up arrow for high energy and a down arrow for low energy. I think it's really important, though, to have the distinction between the two. Don't have like medium energy. In fact, if you know a task and you can't decide whether it's high or low energy, then an energy-based mode being assigned to that task is not a good idea. Again, the idea of mode-based work is to give you the ability to make quicker decisions around what tasks to do, especially when it comes to energy-based ones. Now, the other great thing about energy-based modes is that it allows you to do things like, hey, I'm sick, I'm not feeling 100%, I'm staying home today. Instead of just not doing anything and seeing that work pile up, look at your list and say, okay, what kind of shallow work or low energy tasks can I do today? And then you've got this filtered list of those kind of tasks that you can do, which makes things a lot easier when you go back to work, because instead of saying, you know what, I didn't do anything yesterday because I was sick, instead you could say, you know what, I did a few things because they were really not a huge impact on me and they didn't affect my health all that much. Same thing applies if you're a night owl and you're a morning person. If you're a morning person, you're probably going to attack the high energy and full focus tasks earlier in the day. So look at those. And if you're a night owl, you're going to do those in the evening. And in terms of shallow work or low energy, you're going to swap that. So, if you're a night owl, you're going to do your low energy tasks earlier in the day. And if you're an early riser, you're going to do those later in the day. So energy-based modes are really one of the ones that I think you can leverage. It allows you to kind of have that attached feeling and emotion to your to-do list, which means it's going to connect with you better and you're going to connect with it better. I think that that's one that you might want to look at. And again, when we tie into one of the other categories of mode-based work, you're going to see how two of these definitely have a correlation. We'll get to that in a couple of days. But for now, this has been your 3 minutes of time crafting. I'm Mike Vardy. We'll see you later. Here's your 3 minutes of time crafting for March 7th, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. This next category of mode-based work is probably the most hybrid of all of them, and I'll explain about it in a minute and why that is. But first, I'll go over the first three that we've already talked about. We've talked about theme-based modes, resource-based modes, and yesterday we talked about energy-based modes. This time, we're going to talk about activity-based modes. Now, this is a very simple way to look at these. Are verbs, really. So when I'm looking at these and working with clients and putting these on my own list, it's basically anything that ends at ing. So writing, researching, studying, learning, which honestly is also a theme-based mode. So again, now we're starting to see some crossover between them. In fact, when I've got looking mode and of course listening mode, those are also kind of activity-based modes. But I look at those as theme-based modes because I've made them themes, right? So you could do things again like errand running. Again, you could put errands, but errand running is the activity. It's the verb of doing that, which I think is going to incite the action. The great thing about using activity-based modes is one of the things that always comes up when you're capturing your task and putting them on your to-do list is if you use activity-based modes, you can skip the verb because the verb is indicative inside of the tag or the label that you're putting on your electronic to-do list, or if you're using, let's say, a page in a bullet journal with this particular type of modality, or you're using, kind of an indicator in your paper planner, and we could do this, of course, in the daily progress planner. You could see that as well and say, okay, you know what? These are all my errands that I need to run because this is an errand running mode. You don't need to put buy milk. You could just put milk. Or you could just put library books. And errand running means, it'll trigger you, right? So the verb is inside of the activity-based mode, which is, I think, really, really important. The one thing about these kind of modes is that they're both qualitative and quantitative. We've discussed 3 of them already. Theme-based are definitely more qualitative. I would find resource is definitely more quantitative. Hey, how many things can I do in Microsoft Word? How many things can I do in email? How many things can I talk to my boss about? And energy are definitely qualitative. Like, it's a qualitative mode. This one is a hybrid because some types of writing is going to be more taxing than others, but it's also quantitative. You could say, how much writing did I get done today? How much studying did I get done today? So it's the one that kind of dances between qualitative and quantitative productivity. And it's kind of an interesting one to use. So if you're struggling with putting verbs on your to-do list and you're in a bit of a hurry, these kind of this kind of mode, this category of mode-based work can really help you. So I would encourage you to look at this one. And once we get to the end of this whole series, I'm going to talk to you about how do you pick your modes and how many do you put on and all that stuff. That's going to be something I put in the wrap-up episode, but that's it for today. This has been your 3 minutes of time crafting. I'm Mike Vardy. We will see you later. This is your 3 minutes of time crafting for March 8th, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. Well, we've come to the end of the 5 categories of mode-based work. Tomorrow we're going to talk about some of the finishing touches, but I want to talk about the actual last one today. But before we do, we've talked about theme-based modes, resource-based modes, energy-based modes, and activity-based modes. Today we're going to talk about time-based modes. This is very much a quantitative mode category because, again, it's driven specifically by numbers. How many tasks do you have on your list that will take 5 minutes? How many will take 10? How many will take 30? This is a really, really interesting category because it's one that a lot of people will use, but unfortunately, it's also one of the things that we struggle with because we don't know how long it will take necessarily to complete a task, which is why it's so important to break down your tasks to their smallest increments. Break down projects to their smallest particles, like I say. So if a task seems like a project, it probably is. So break it down to smaller increments. And then things like fixing a hole in a ceiling don't become just fixing a hole in a ceiling and you've got to have a time-based mode of, 3 days. Instead, you could break it down and say, I've got to call a repairman. That'll take me 5 minutes. Or I've got to research different repairman. Okay, that's going to take me 15 minutes. One of the things that I stress when people are trying to adopt this category of mode is don't have more than 3 modes, time modes. So for example, I have 5-minute mode, 15-minute mode, and 25-minute mode in, homage to the Pomodoro technique because the whole 25-minute increments is about as long as you can concentrate on a specific task. You might want to have 2 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, but don't go with 5. Pick 3 and find a nice range for those to live in. Secondly, once you get to the higher levels of those, so like 30 minutes, just remember that time-based modes may not necessarily work if you've got a task that's going to take more than one sitting to complete. So if it's going to take, 5 30-minute sessions, you might want to categorize it with, say, deep work or high energy, because energy levels and time tend to go hand in hand with this sort of thing. So if it's going to take you longer to complete, then there's a good chance it's going to be a higher energy task. Or if it takes you 5 minutes or less to complete, chances are it's a bit more shallow work. So again, this is where these go hand in hand. And I often find that once people start using energy-based modes, they tend not to use time-based modes nearly as much. I know that's the case for me. More often than not, I'm using the least incremental one, so the 5-minute mode. That's really the only one I use at this point. If it's going to take any longer, then I'm really not using a time-based mode at all because, frankly, I'm still a poor judge of how long it will take to complete a certain task, at least the bigger ones. So there you go. Those are all 5 categories, and we're going to wrap up the series tomorrow talking about some of the things that you can do to make them work. I'll see you tomorrow. This is your 3 minutes of time crafting for March 9th, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. Whew, that was a good series. You now have the baseline for what you need to start categorizing your tasks by modes. Now, why is mode-based work a really great way to work? Well, because you're treating yourself better when you do it. You're treating your brain better. You are grouping your tasks in a way that your brain is naturally designed to work. You're grouping them in a fashion that makes sense to the human mind. And you'll notice that the acronym for all of those categories comes down to the word treat. Theme-based modes, resource-based modes, energy-based modes, activity-based modes, and time-based modes. So when you work by mode, you're treating yourself better. It's a treat to work however you want to fill it in. I would recommend that when you're adopting these, start with one category of mode that makes the most sense to you first. Don't try to do all 5. Okay, pick the one that works the best for you. Maybe pick a second one. To that end, don't have all 5 categories of modes for every task. You don't need to do that. Whichever ones work the best for you are ideal. So for me, it's often the theme-based mode, which is what day or what hour, like group of hours, what horizontal theme or daily theme. I want to see that, but I also need to know, how much energy is it going to take for me to do that, right? I will occasionally use activity-based modes because they do have that quantitative and qualitative feel, but rarely will I use the resource ones. In fact, I generally only use those for people. And time-based ones, like I said in the last episode, I generally use only for tasks that are going to take a quick period of time. And the reason I do that is, let's say I have 2 meetings, which actually today I do. I have 2 meetings that have a 15-minute break between them. I will go look at that 5-minute mode and say, okay, well, can I get which 3 tasks can I get complete between those two areas, as opposed to jumping into email or doing something different. Okay, so keep that in mind. The other thing is, if you are not going to use a category of modes, so let's say you're not going to use resource-based modes and you're going to do work in Microsoft Word, you're going to want to put in there, go into Word and work on this, and then the category might be deep work or full focus or 35 minutes or whatever your modes are. So again, if you're not using a mode, you need to be a bit more specific with the task. So if you're not using activity-based modes, you could say go buy milk at the grocery store. That could be a shallow work task, or it could take you 15 minutes, or it could be something you do on your household day. Again, modes help you with the distinction of the details of what you need to do in very specific tasks, and allows you to kind of get in that state of flow and work in a more humane way. At least I find that, and I hope you will too. So I'd love to hear from you. You can email me at askmike@productivityist.com about what you thought about this series and if it winds up working for you. That's it for today. I'll see you later. Here's your 3 minutes of time crafting for March 10th, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. So one of the things that I touched on in the last series was this idea of mode-based work, to be able to work and treat yourself in a way that allows you to get into the state of flow and stay in the state of flow a whole lot longer and make measured progress on your projects every single day, or at least every single time you work by mode. Why does this work so effectively? Why does theming your time work so effectively, at least from my perspective and the perspective of others that I've worked with? Well, it's simple. If you've got the right modalities in place and you've got the right themes in place, then you've future-proofed your schedule. What do I mean by that? Well, for example, let's look at my Fridays. My Fridays are known as deep work days. So when I work on Fridays as deep work, I know that I'm supposed to be focused intently on the stuff that's going to take a lot of concentration and a lot of focus. In order to allow that to happen, I need to make sure that I'm uninterrupted for the day. In other words, meetings that I either did not set up myself, and when I talk about those are very much exceptions to the rule, but no one can actually schedule meetings with me on Fridays. So if I wake up on a Friday morning, knowing that it's deep work day, I also have the knowledge that there is a strong likelihood that there are no meetings that day. This past Friday, I did have a few meetings, but they were deep conversations. They were not coaching calls. They were not work meetings. They were more of the deep conversation types that I can have with friends, especially since where I live, I don't have a lot of friends that work in my space. So it is a bit more challenging for me to get that social time in. So that's a kind of deep work for me. But I future-proof my schedule because knowing that Fridays are not going to be an ability for me to have a lot of meetings because I won't be able to get a lot of deep work done, I've mapped out my scheduling appointment service to make sure that no meetings can be booked on Fridays. And also because now when I wake up every Friday morning, my brain goes, what day is it? Oh, it's deep work day. Okay, what do I do that qualifies as deep work? Let me take a look at my to-do list and see. Same thing with mode-based work. You could probably hear my voice is a little bit raspy. I'm a bit under the weather. So if I say to myself, I don't really feel like doing a lot today, and today I do not, I'm both emotionally and physically not up to snuff, I can say, okay, well, let me look at all of the low energy work that I can do. I don't need to try to think about what I need to do. I've future-proofed my to-do list and my calendar to allow me to say, okay, you know what? Today is Sunday, it's planning day, but I'm not going to get a lot of planning done when I feel like this. So let me look at all of my low energy tasks and work by mode instead and get some of those done, bang those out. One of the things that future-proofing your schedule also does is it allows you to eliminate some of the friction around making decisions. And I'll get to that tomorrow. But today I'm done with your 3 minutes of time crafting. I'll see you later. This is your 3 minutes of time crafting for March 11th, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. So yesterday I talked about future proofing, and today I want to talk about the idea of future shock. Which is a book written by Alvin Toffler. We're talking years ago. I'm spending a lot more time reading books that are older, that you wouldn't normally think are in the zeitgeist nowadays, but they've got a timeless message that I think can apply. And what's interesting is Future Shock, when it was written, and I believe it was written in like the early 70s, a lot of what was being discussed now was prevalent then, and a lot of what Alvin Toffler thought would come to pass has in some way, shape, or form. But one of the terms he coins in that book is the term overchoice, which is, an embarrassment of choices, like too many choices so that you can't make a decision. I'll give you an example of that, a practical example of overchoice versus, an ability to have filtered choices. So let's say you're going to go shop for ketchup at for a barbecue, or just for, actually, let's scratch that. Let's say it's for your household. So you've got a family of 4. You're going to go shop for ketchup. You've got 2 grocery stores that you can go to. You can go to Walmart or you can go to Costco. Well, you're going to Walmart, and there's not just one brand of ketchup. There's many brands of ketchup, and there's many different sizes of ketchup, and there's different prices and different sizes and all that stuff. And you're like, well, what ketchup should I get? You're evaluating not only the different sizes, the different prices, you're evaluating all of that different brands. Conversely, you go to Costco. There are 3 sizes of ketchup, all one brand. There's the big tin, there's the 3-pack, and then there's the little restaurant packs. When you go to Costco to buy ketchup, you have a choice. One of 4 options. Buy the big tin, buy the 3-pack, buy the little packets, don't buy ketchup. So 4 choices makes it that much simpler for you to get through that and move on to the next thing. Whereas at Walmart, you can be faced with overchoice. Well, which ketchup should I buy? How long is it going to last? It can slow you down. You may not even buy ketchup at all, but it can slow you down until you've made a consistent choice around it. So what theming your time and mode-based work do, which I talked about in recently, is it gives you the ability to limit choices, to filter your focus. So that way what happens is, instead of you saying, okay, what do I do? And you look at your entire to-do list, instead you're saying, okay, right now I have 5 minutes. Let me look at all the tasks that I could do in 5 minutes or less. Or today is planning day. Let me look at all the tasks that I tagged with planning. So it really does limit the amount of choice you have, removing decision fatigue from the equation. And so that way you can get progress and make measured progress, instead of just, trying to move forward as in any way, shape, or form that you can. So there you go. That's been your 3 minutes of time crafting for today. I'm Mike Vardy. We'll see you later. This is your 3 minutes of time crafting for March 12th, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. So Marie Kondo is all the rage right now. The KonMari method, sparking joy, all of that stuff. And it's a real interesting phenomenon, the way that the media has kind of jumped on this. And why am I bringing this up in this particular episode? Well, I want you to understand that what the message that is being sent by third parties versus what the deeper message is and what she's trying to do. And it's not just Marie Kondo that tries to do this. It's professional organizers in general. And even to a degree, what I do is, Marie Kondo is not about minimizing. It's not about getting rid of stuff. It's not necessarily about decluttering either. That's just an initiation. It's a jumping off point. It's a touchstone. It's like Kevin Cruz and I talked about that this week when I was recording a podcast with him. the idea that we say time management. I don't like the term time management, productivity even. Like, I think that they're important words because they are universally understood, but I think there's far better. I mean, we hear terms like attention management, energy management. I like to use the term leading your time as opposed to managing it. Lots of different things. So what does this have to do with Marie Kondo? Well, really at the core of what she's trying to do is she's trying to get you to be more organized. That's really all it is. Tidying is about having, that idea of working clean, which I've talked about before in an episode of this show. You need to get past the whole 30 books thing that's being discussed. Hey, she says only keep 30 books. Not true at all. If you have 100 books that you want to keep and they all spark joy and they may need to serve a purpose again down the road, that's okay. Even minimalism to a degree, and I've talked about this too, is the same. It's just important to get, when you've got a buzzword, when you've got this thing happening with a craze like Marie Kondo and the KonMari method, it's important to read the book. Don't just watch the TV series, read the book. Don't just read third-party articles, read her work. Yes, she's got boxes and it's a business, but by the same token, the core of her business is to make sure that the stuff that they have has an intention. And then again, ultimately that they're put in a place where you can pay attention to them, which is not unlike what I do with my to-do list. I have my intentions, which are my tasks, and I have a way to pay attention to them, whether they're categorized by mode or by theme or, using time theming, whatever. So again, look deeper. I think that's the ultimate message here is when you see something, you come across it and it's got that BuzzFeedy, clickbaity kind of headline to it, try to look deeper. Take the time to look deeper, and you might find that the message that they're sending isn't the real message overall. This has been your 3 minutes of time crafting. This is your 3 minutes of time crafting for March 13th, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. One of the things that I think I struggle with, and I know that others that I've talked to and work with struggle with, is you've got this great framework in place or you've read all the productivity books or you've read all the productivity articles and you're life hacking like nobody's business. But one of the things that I come across for people who are either new to it or they're struggling is the need and sometimes unwillingness just to look at the way to get through today. So let's look at the person who has been using established productivity practices for a while, and they've just hit a wall for the day, or the framework is it's not standing up necessarily to the demands of the long term, and that you need to reevaluate it, and that there's more work that needs to be done, or you're just being overwhelmed by people and their demands. Sometimes you just need to focus on getting through the day, and that is a great way to get started. And it's a great fallback when things aren't necessarily going your way. You've got some emotional stuff going on. There's, again, overwhelm, distress, whatever. So it's what you really want to make sure you have in place is this ability to look at today and go, okay, let's shut out everything else. Grab all the tasks that are on my digital list or my paper planner and just grab a Post-it note and put down, if I can just get these 5 things done, kind of like my 5 waves, the waves, the 5 things: write, book, audio, video, exercise, social. If I can get those 5 things done, then I've gotten through today. And again, if you can't get all 5 done, but you get the majority of them done, that's fine too. But I think you have to have that baseline, because if you do, then when you finish the day and you journal at the end of the day, that you can say, look, I got through today. I didn't get everything that I needed or wanted to get done, but I got through today, right? Because tomorrow is another day, better today, or good today, better tomorrow kind of thing. Now, for those who are new to the productivity frameworks and they haven't really had one, you're probably only focused on getting through today in most of the situations. And that needs to still be there. But if that happens constantly, and again, through journaling, you'll see this, then you need to have a framework that can scale beyond today. Again, you could look at TimeCrafting and say that does that with the idea of theming your days and mode-based work and things like that. But sometimes we just need to get through today. And if today is one of those days for you, that's okay. It's okay. Today's like that for me. As I'm recording this, I just need to get through today. Just know that tomorrow, if you have a framework to rely on, then you can get beyond today and to tomorrow. If you don't, then you're going to want to look at something that can support you with that. This has been your 3 minutes of time crafting. I'm Mike Vardy. I'll see you later. This is your 3 minutes of time crafting for March 14th, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. So today is Pi Day. I don't normally associate my episodes of this podcast with days of the week, but I felt it was almost fitting that I would discuss the idea of something that's infinite but gets rounded down for the sake of brevity or even just being able to calculate its sheer size. But 3.14 is pi. That's why it's March 14th. And what does this have to do with productivity and your to-do lists and all that stuff? Well, I have to say that most people's to-do lists often wind up as infinitesimal as the actual number pi. They don't just stop at the 4. They continue and they continue. And there's good reason for that. We have a lot of aspirations that we want to accomplish over the course of our lives. And we have others who have certain demands that we need to achieve and fulfill for them over the course of our lives. So without a doubt, we're getting tons of inputs that we should be putting on our to-do list for today, for tomorrow, for the next week and beyond. And the problem with that is that it becomes so overwhelming. Even me just talking about this right now, it's making me feel a bit overwhelmed, despite the fact that I have a way to really look at my to-do list in a way that does kind of round it down to the nearest decimal point, for lack of a better term. So this is what you need to do with a to-do list that seems infinite. And you're not too far off if that's what you believe, because it's pretty true. It does seem fairly infinite. What you need to do is you have to have a way to filter it. So whether your filter is just to look at the day, that's fine. But remember, you're only going to get through today if you do that. Whether it's to look at the week and look at the week as a whole and say, okay, what do I need to accomplish this week and do that? That's another way to do it. Another way to filter your to-do list is to look at it by project. Hey, I'm going to work on these tasks that are assigned to this project. Provided that you've broken down the project into smaller tasks, that's another way to do it. Another way I would suggest you do it is to look at your tasks through modality. And I did a series on that not too long ago about like using modes to filter your to-do list. Themes are one of those. So there's several different ways that you can kind of scope and scan your to-do list in a way that makes it look like it's not the infinite or never-ending thing that it might appear to be from time to time. So what you want to do is round it down, and filtering your to-do list in any way that you can is incredibly helpful. And you need to take the time to do that, because once you do, then you're going to get a nice dose of reality and you're going to be able to move forward with the best day possible. There you go. Happy Pi Day, everybody. That's it for this episode of 3 Minutes of Time Crafting. I'll see you later. This is your 3 Minutes of Time Crafting for March 15th, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. So I have made no secret of the fact that I'm a night owl. I am a big believer in listening to your body clock. It's one of the tenets of time crafting that I've discussed before, whether it's on this show or on one of my past podcasts or one of my many blog posts. It's out there. And one of the things that, much like we hear with minimalism and all these other, is that this idea of being an early riser is something to aspire to. If you are an early riser, then you are going to be more successful. And again, there are no bones about it. It doesn't necessarily matter when you get up. It more or less matters how you prioritize your day. So if you get up at 10 in the morning versus 3 in the morning, you could be doing the same things that person is doing at 3 in the morning, and you still have the same measure of success in terms of that element. There's other factors that play into it, of course. But I think that's an important thing to note, is it's not so much what time you go to bed and what time you get up. It's what you do with those waking hours and how you leverage your energy levels along the way so that you can have the best days, weeks, etc. possible. The key here is, of course, is to get the right amount of sleep. Now, there are tons of studies about this. I'm not going to go into the details of sleep in terms of studies, but it's a hot topic right now. It used to be a badge of honor to get by on as little sleep as possible. And that's slowly and thankfully going by the wayside. Instead, we're more concerned about getting between the 6 to 8 hours of sleep that we need. For reference, I get 7 hours. I kind of go right down the middle, and I think that's a good happy medium, 7 hours. So I will go to bed around 1 in the morning, and I'll get up at around 8 in the morning. And that's my my main goal. Now, if and this is again, schedules can change. So I have that luxury, but in some instances I have clients on the East Coast that want to meet with me at 7 a.m. If that's the case, I can't go to bed at 1 and get up at 6. I have to go to bed earlier. So you do need to look at your day-to-day to structure your sleep in a way that gets you that optimal amount of time of sleep. But what you want to do is you want to kind of head that off of the pass as much as possible and structure your schedule in a way that happens less often than you'd hope. So, for example, as soon as one of my East Coast clients dropped off, I said, okay, that's it. I'm cutting it off. I'm not going to be doing those early morning calls anymore. So again, I don't think it matters. In fact, I know it doesn't matter whether you're an early riser or a night owl. What does matter is the amount of sleep you get. So no matter what time you go to bed, try to get that 6 to 8 hours every single night. Do your best to do that. That's it for your 3 minutes of time crafting for today. I'm Mike Vardy. This is your 3 minutes of time crafting for March 16th, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. So I want to tell you a little story about me, and then I'll lead into a story about someone else. Something I haven't shared too widely, but I'm not as hesitant to do so anymore, is that I'm a pro wrestling fan. I've been watching pro wrestling since I was a kid. I find it to be a fantastic escape, and I make no apologies for watching the spectacle that is professional wrestling. And one of the people that I kind of watched during it would be my late teens into probably, in my 20s, into my, throughout that decade would have been Stone Cold Steve Austin, who is now gone on to do other things. He's got popular podcasts. He's done television shows, but he was the hottest thing in pro wrestling for a long period of time. During his run in the World Wrestling Federation at the time, he was the embodiment of the everyday man, going up against the corporate leader that was Vince McMahon, and everyone loved him. He was the guy that kind of, along with Dwayne The Rock Johnson, and a few others, kind of led the way to having World Wrestling Federation ultimately win the battle of the wrestling companies that happened on Monday nights between Ted Turner and Vince McMahon. But what is interesting about Steve Austin is that he was not an overnight success. He started out, in WCW, and he was quite well regarded there as a good worker. And then he went on to ECW, which was Extreme Championship Wrestling, after he was fired by WCW. And, that's when this new Stone Cold persona started to emerge. But when he actually showed up in World Wrestling Federation for the first time, he was known as the ringmaster. He wasn't even allowed to speak. He was the $1 million champion. He was the kind of the protege of Ted $1 Million Man DiBiase. Only at a pay-per-view called King of the Ring, when he finally uttered the words Austin 316, said, "I just kicked your ass," did all of a sudden things change. Why do I tell you this? Well, he applied his wrestling trade for well over a decade before he hit the big time, before he hit the major success. I think showing up every day is important, but I think patience and perseverance is a big factor. So when you are looking at moving up, moving on, gaining experience, getting better, just remember that the overnight success story is not so much a reality. There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes before you get to see the spotlight. Steve Austin's a good example of that, and there's many others like him. That's it for this episode of 3 Minutes of Time Crafting. I'm Mike Vardy. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you later. This is your 3 Minutes of Time Crafting for March 17th, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. So I want to talk to you about luck and productivity today. It seems like a fitting day to do so. And how does luck play into everything? Well, I'm going to talk specifically about the idea of due dates. Not DO dates, which is what I like, but DUE dates, the ones that we're more commonly associated with when it comes to time management and productivity. So let's talk about luck and due dates. And I want to talk to this about regarding the idea of, let's say, you have an exam coming up or a test. We'll go back to our school days. And the test is going to happen, on May 31st, let's say. And so you put that in your calendar or your to-do list, and you just let it sit there and let it sit there. And then all of a sudden you look at your calendar the week of, May 31st, go, oh, right, there's that test this weekend. And you still let it go and you still let it go. And then May 30th, you're like, oh, I guess I better study. It's happening tomorrow. And you take the test and you get the results back and you do well. With just cramming, you did well. Now, what does luck have to do with that? Well, I would say that this way that you approached the exam and this test and how you approach studying it was a bad process. You didn't make measurable gains in your study time. You didn't study a little bit every night. Instead, you crammed at the end. And the result, while positive, was dumb luck. Bad process, good outcome often equals dumb luck. Eventually, that kind of luck will run out. You will run out of luck. Luck will only take you so far. Eventually, you have to decide to put your stake in the ground and put a process in place and learn how to make time work for you instead of hoping that you're going to get lucky, right? Even the best gamblers out there study the game. Even whether it's working, whether it's the tables in Vegas, whether it's horse racing, whatever. Even the guys who are betting on pro sports, they study. They get to know their trade. They get to know their game. They get to know what they're looking at because they know that luck will only be on their side so much. They need to have something to back that up. And so do you. So the next time you're thinking about, oh, I'll put that project off, it'll be fine, and you've been getting lucky and things have worked out for you, just remember that luck is going to run out. And when it does, you better be ready to either have something there to back it up or you better be ready to implement something that will. Because if you don't, then you won't be lucky anymore. You'll be unlucky. That's it for this episode of 3 Minutes of Time Crafting. I'm Mike Vardy. I'll see you later. This is your 3 Minutes of Time Crafting for March 18th, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. So you're going on vacation. You're taking a break from the workplace. Everything is set to go. You've got all of your ducks in a row. You've signed out of all your task apps. Everyone knows you're going to be gone except for the people that may not know. Those are people outside your organization. Or maybe if you're an entrepreneur working from home, no one knows. And you want to make sure that you let people know that you're not going to be around. Well, I wrote a blog post a long time ago called The One Email That You Must Send Before You Go on Vacation. And it's by far my most popular blog post on the site, at least over the past couple of years. And so I'm going to share with you what you should put in this email. I'll link to it in the show notes. But nonetheless, here we go. This is what you should have available to send to everybody before you go on vacation. Client name. I will be out of the office from date leaving to date returning, but wanted to assure you that I have handed off all important information off to delegate's name while I am away. Should you have any questions or need anything during this time, please feel free to contact delegate's name and they will do their best to assist you. Any correspondence, email or phone calls sent my way will be responded to within 2 to 3 days of my return. Sincerely, your name. That's it. It's as simple as that. You should send that email out to colleagues. So instead of a client, you'd mention colleagues. You should send it out to clients, of course. You may even want to send it out to people that are, you may want to put that in a blog post, or a newsletter or anything like that. Just get in front of these sort of things. That's the big message I want to send to you today is you want to get in front of things like email before you go on vacation. And the reason is simple. You want to be able to enjoy the vacation. You want to be able to enjoy your time away from the office because when you get back, you're going to be facing a deluge of correspondence. And that's why you also want to give that 2 to 3 days buffer. Because if you look at the dates that they sent, you're going to be sitting there going, okay. And by the way, that buffer is just a guideline. You might want to give longer. You might want to say 3 to 5 business days or within 1 week of my return. But that's the gist of it. What you want to do is you want to make sure you're very clear. You want to make sure you have somebody else that's taking over for you. And if no one else is taking over for you, then you can eliminate that. I'm going to be away. I'll get back to you within X period of time upon my return. But you need to send that email. You can even set that up as your autoresponder when you're out of office too. Just remove the client name part. That's it. Simple thing that you can do to enjoy your vacation with peace of mind. That's it for your 3 minutes of time crafting for today. I'm Mike Vardy. I'll see you later. This is your 3 minutes of time crafting for March 19th, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. So I did a workshop once for some clients, and one of the things that concerned one of the people in the workshop in particular was this idea that they couldn't theme their days. Now, this is not something that I'm a stranger to. I hear this all the time, and I'm often able to kind of help people push past those limiting beliefs. But this person's role in particular, I could see it was going to be tough. There was one particular type of role that they fulfilled. It was a rather potpourri of tasks that when you looked at all the verbs associated with and all the modes, they kind of fit into one bucket. So a theme would not necessarily work for her in terms of daily themes. But I did tell her about horizontal themes, which I think would work. And I'm going to actually touch more on horizontal theming in the not too distant future here on the podcast. But if you've heard me talk about it before, you know that horizontal theming is this idea of theming instead of day of the week by time of the day. So I said to her, well, what do you need to do? What do you need to do in your job? And she goes, well, I need to do a bunch of things for these people, and then I need to do a bunch of things for myself. And I thought about it for a second. I said, you need to divide your day into two halves. Your first half of your day should be serving mode, where you do everything that everyone else has given to you that they're waiting on, so something that you have to do for other people. So instead of it being so much the work that you need to do, it's all about serving everybody else. And yes, there's going to be some crossover, but that's up to you to decide. Then you take your lunch break, a full stop break. Then after lunch, you go into self-serving mode. And that's when you work on the things that you need to work on, knowing full well that you've helped everybody else that you needed to beforehand. Now, yes, you'll get the odd interruption and stuff like that, but by and large, your overarching focus will be to do self-serving stuff. And she liked that idea, but she said, well, but isn't that selfish of me to do the self-serving stuff, like setting aside that much time? And I said, listen, if you do the self-serving stuff right, you're going to be serving others anyway. They've asked you to do this kind of work. It's the kind of work that's going to help the organization as a whole. So instead of having that bias in your head of I should be serving everybody else, when you self-serve, if you're doing it right and you've timed it right, you're going to be serving others as well. And with that, she was off to the races and started doing it. And last I heard, it was still working out pretty well. So that could be something for you to explore. If let's say you can't theme your days, or you can't theme every single day of the week, but you're like, you know what, I like this idea of serving others and then serving myself. There's a strategy for you right here on a quick little podcast for you. So there you go. That's it for today for your 3 minutes of time crafting. I'm Mike Vardy. We'll see you later. This is your 3 minutes of time crafting for March 20th, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. I want you to take a look at your to-do list for a second and just take a look at the tasks that you have lined up for today and maybe the next few days. And just really look at it. Look at all the items that are on it. You don't have to do it now, but maybe when you're done listening, go back and look at it. Because the to-do list that you have, your to-do list, is the story that you're telling. It's the story that you're telling others. It's the story that you're telling yourself, most importantly. It is a story. My question to you is it the story that you want to be telling? Is it the story that you should be living? Are there things on that to-do list that don't belong in your story? Or do they belong in your story, but you've handed them off to someone else so that you can still live them, but you don't have to be part of them as much as you would be if you're doing them yourself? What about the dates that you're doing things? Do you feel rushed? Is that your story? Are you spending more time dealing with things that are seemingly on fire than things that need to be nurtured and grown? Is that the story that you're telling yourself? Are you pushing things off to the next day and the next day and the next day? Is that your story? There are so many nuances and subtleties in your to-do list. You're going to see things there. You're going to see things like common verbs. That's your story. Maybe you do a lot of research. Maybe you do a lot of reading. Maybe you do a lot of emailing. Is that your story? There are so many things that you can see in your to-do list. The one that you're looking at, the one that's in front of you right now. But here's the best part. The next to-do list is unwritten. And the one after that, and the one after that. You can decide what will go on your to-do list and what won't. You can decide if there's not enough. You can decide if the right things are there or if the wrong things are there, and then add more of the right and get rid of more of the wrong. But you need to slow down in order to do this. In order to really read a story, you're going to need to take the time to look at it. You're going to need to study it. You're going to need to learn it. Because sometimes the story that we're telling is not the story that we want to be telling. And the to-do list can be very telling. So when you go to look at your to-do list, take a look at it and ask yourself, are these the things that I really need and want to be doing? And if not, how can I fix that? Here's your 3 minutes of time crafting for March 21st, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. So when I think about my memory and when I think about remembering things and recall, one of the things I've noticed over the years is that I'm not as good at remembering things as I used to. I'm not saying that I'm not good at recall or remembering very specific moments, let's say. Some things that are, momentous occasions in my life. But, because I've cultivated this habit of writing things down and capturing them as I go, I'm not relying on my brain as much to remember things. And I think that really kind of works both for and against you, depending on, how you want to frame your time and how you define being productive. I'm a big believer in the idea that, your mind was meant to be a factory and not a warehouse. So storing just frivolous stuff, trivial stuff in there isn't necessarily the best use of your brain power. Now, some stuff's going to be there anyway. Some stuff is going to be stored there and there's nothing that you can really do about it. And some stuff is going to not stick that you want to have stick. And that's why I'm such a big believer in the idea of journaling. Now, I journal every single night. I use an application called Day One, but you could use anything. You could use a paper notebook, whatever. And I take a photo as kind of like a trigger for things that I might want to capture or moments that have happened throughout the day. But, when I was talking to Austin Kleon about this for an upcoming episode of the Productivityist podcast, we talked about the idea of, going back and looking at the journal entries. And he said, one of the things he said is maybe I'm weird to do that, but I don't think so. I do the same thing. And I think what the journaling gives you and what a journal gives you is kind of the story, right? I've talked about how your to-do list is a story yesterday. Well, the journaling gives you the story of your life, really. Sure, the calendar tells you certain things, but it doesn't really give you the depth. It doesn't give you the real emotional context or even the content for what happened during your day. So I'm going to encourage you, whether you have a great memory or not, give journaling a try. Take a few minutes every day, whether in the morning, in the night, or whatever, and just journal. And the old argument that I don't have time to journal is an invalid one, most certainly if you are on Facebook, because then you're journaling for the world. So take 5 minutes a day and journal for yourself. You'd be surprised at what you get out of that story that you're telling every single day. That's it for your 3 minutes of time crafting for today. I'm Mike Vardy. I'll see you later. Happy journaling. This is your 3 minutes of time crafting for March 22nd, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. So in a recent conversation I had with Austin Kleon, we talked about the idea of fooling around with time and the idea of wasting time. And the thing is that, sometimes it's okay to waste time. Especially if you're wasting it, as he puts it, on something that's delicious, right? You're going to hear more from this in a future weekly episode of the Productivityist podcast. So if you're not subscribed to that, you might want to give that a look in wherever you're listening to podcasts nowadays. But I think it's important to note that all time, it's going to happen no matter what you're doing. Time is moving on whether you want it to or not. And to make use of all of your time very specifically and deliberately on work or on things that, maybe don't necessarily feel like they're moving you forward, isn't always the best thing to do. I think it's important to do things that others might qualify as wasting time. And even you might qualify as a waste of time as compared to something that definitively will bring you progress. Those kind of moments are important because they allow you to recharge. They allow you to take a break from everything else that's going on. So, for example, it's the idea of jumping onto Facebook. I talked about this with Cal Newport in another episode of the Productivityist podcast. It's in the archives. This idea of being on Facebook deliberately, I think, is great so that you can, kind of quote, maybe waste some time there. I think you can combine those two as well, because it is okay to waste time every once in a while. It's not something that you want to do consistently, and you need to be mindful of it. But if you put yourself in position to kind of fritter it away from time to time, that's okay. We're human. We need to explore other areas. We need to pull back from the things that are, either hard or that are incredibly progressive, to do some things that just, give us that break or even give us that pleasure. And it's also important that when you think about something that's wasting time, ask yourself, is this really a waste of my time? Going to a hockey game, sure, you could do other things during those 3 hours, but is it a waste of time to go to that hockey game? If you enjoy hockey, no, it's not. So I think it's the core message of this episode is really to understand first off, it's okay to waste time. And secondly, evaluate whether it's time that you're wasting in the first place at all. I mean, are those things that you are, quote, wasting time on really time wasters, or are they things that bring you pleasure that you need in order to fill your cup so you can be more productive and use your time a little bit differently, perhaps better, down the road? That's it for this episode of 3 Minutes of Time Crafting. I'm Mike Vardy. We'll see you later. This is your 3 Minutes of Time Crafting for March 23rd, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. So, one of the things that I find that happens with many of the clients I work with, and anyone who really comes up to me and asks me about to-do lists, is not only the notion of putting tasks down in a way that seem insurmountable to complete in one sitting. For example, write book, work on report, clean house, things like that. So they don't break down the projects into their smallest particles, but also they don't really take into account the idea that a recurring task is something that you need to kind of earmark time for consistently. For example, if you are going to work, if you're going to use the term work on report, and you're not going to get it done in one sitting, using one of the elements of a really good to-do list app, or one that's actually any that are worth its salt should really have the ability to make a task recurring, is important. That you need to denote that. Because then ultimately what happens is it brings it to your attention consistently. And that's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about due dates specifically. We're talking about like attention dates. Hey, I need to work on this. And whether it's a recurring task that happens every single day or every single week, or even, in a less frequent basis, it's important that if you recognize that a task, and you're not going to break it down to, its minimum viable element, right? You're not going to break it down to the smallest element, whether it's a project or a task, then you need to put in this implementation of recurrence. Because if you don't, then what's going to happen is you're going to leave it open. So in a whether it's on a paper planner or a to-do list app, if you don't have either the ability or the wherewithal to mark it as a recurring task, you're just going to leave it as if you've not completed any of it in your app. Or in your paper planner. So you need to carry it over, like, hey, I did it today. I made progress on it today. Now let me carry it over again to tomorrow because it needs my attention again tomorrow, or whenever the next instance is. I think it's really important that you understand that recurring tasks need to you need to show progress on them every day. Or every time you work on them, you need to have that, because then you know that, hey, I did something with relation to it. Again, the simplest way is to break these projects down to their smallest particles. So that way you can, instead of saying work on report, you could say, hey, file, research file X for this report. And then that part's done. So then you're not doing recurrences so much as you're doing the smallest tasks, and you're making measured progress that way. If you can't do that, or you don't want to do that, then you have to have a way to make these tasks recurring, because you know that you're not going to get them all done in one sitting. So I want you to keep that in mind moving forward, whether you're using a digital tool or an analog tool. Make sure that you check off every time you work on something that recurs, because otherwise it's not going to feel like you did anything with it at all. This has been your 3 Minutes of Time Crafting. I'm Mike Vardy. We'll see you later. This is your 3 minutes of time crafting for March 24th, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. Today I want to introduce you to a concept that I introduced, years ago in this book I had called the Productivityist Workbook. If you've read it, then this is just a revisitation for you, but it's called the idea criteria. And what it is it's something that I use to evaluate every big idea that I have so I know whether or not it's worth moving forward on. This goes in conjunction, of course, with my monthly themes and 3 words and all that stuff that I've talked about before, as well as my annual axiom, which I'm digging into more in my upcoming book. But here's what the idea criteria stands for. The acronym is IDEA. So in order for it to be an idea that I want to invest in and move forward with, I need to kind of have all of these 4, at least most of these 4 covered. So number 1 is ideals that I hold must be upheld by pursuing it. So what I mean by that is that if I'm going to pursue the idea, then it must be something that I'm, kind of aligned with. D stands for doesn't interfere with anything else that I'm excited about. And in fact, it should probably complement that in some way, shape, or form. So if that's not happening, then that's going to be a big, black check against it rather than for it. The E stands for excitement about the idea. It must be lasting. Sometimes we have ideas and they come to us and then they go away just as quickly as they arrive. This must be lasting. And then the A stands for it must be able to generate direct or passive income. Now, this is something particular to me, mainly because I run a business, so it needs to be able to do something that I can generate a level of revenue from. So I'll give you an example based on something I'm creating called the Beyond Productivity Group Coaching Intensive. So when I put this through the idea criteria against everything else that I've got going on, including working on my book and my membership site and all that, I said, does this, do the ideals that I hold, will this work with them? And yes, because I do coaching. So yes, and I want to help people in as many ways as possible. Does it interfere with anything else I'm excited about? No, not really, because if anything, it complements, and again, it complements the book. It complements my existing coaching. E, is there excitement about it that's lasting? Yes, because I can help people and I can also build this into something that's maybe a little bit more passive that I don't have to be as directly involved with, or I can do it again in the future. And then finally, is it able to generate direct or passive income? Well, I am charging for it, so yes. So you may want to apply this to your own, ideas that you're coming up with, like, in some way, shape, or form, because it does help you figure out, hey, is this something I can pursue? And again, if it's not, it doesn't mean that you're never going to do it. You just cast it aside for now and put it in a place where you can learn to reevaluate it or check to reevaluate it later. So there you go. This is the idea criteria. It's something that I think will help you. I know it's helped me, and I'd love to hear from you if it does. That's it for your 3 minutes of time crafting for today. I'm Mike Vardy. I'll see you later. This is your 3 minutes of time crafting for March 25th, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. When you think about a book like The Lord of the Rings, which is huge. It's actually a series, right? There's 3 different books, The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King. And then you think about when they've been put in a movie form and, some of them were divided up into more than one film because they were just so long. And I guess they wanted to, Peter Jackson wanted it to be as true to the book as possible. You have to realize that, those are big undertakings, but in order for you to be able to bring them to life on the small screen, you've got to look at all of the small details. And I've talked about this before, but I want to drive it home again, that if you're working on something big, and I'll tell you right now, I'm about a week out from announcing something that is big that I'm working on. And what happens when you have that big idea, which again alludes to something I spoke of yesterday when I talked about the idea criteria, you need to take that big idea and break it down to as small, of an element for each task that you can. So break it down into the smallest possible particles. So the project particles, that's what I talk about. Because when you do that, you are going to have the greatest chance of making consistent progress on it. In this case, this big thing I'm working on, this opus, for lack of a better term, it needs to be broken down into the smallest possible increments so that I can see and feel that I'm making progress on it. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to, just put like, write this or do that. It's going to be like the details, the finer details. So I sat down yesterday on my planning day and literally mapped out every element of this thing. And actually, it's not a week away from me announcing; it's a little bit longer than that. But nonetheless, I need to, as of the beginning of April, I need to make sure that I'm drilling into this because it's now my monthly theme, and it's going to be something I'm going to be carrying over for the next few months. So big things need to be broken down into the smallest elements possible, so that you can really make sure that they end up getting as close to what you envisioned as possible. Big things are made up of small things, and small things done well make a big thing done well. So I want you to keep that in mind when you're looking at, big projects or initiatives. Break them down into those small, tiny elements, because it's those tiny elements that are going to make it the thing that you really want to put out into the world. That's it for your 3 minutes of time crafting for today. I'm Mike Vardy, and I will see you later. This is your 3 minutes of time crafting for March 26th, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. So I have the same breakfast pretty much every single day. I say pretty much, I'd say 90% of the time. It's a smoothie with spinach, and we actually get the Walmart frozen smoothie packets that are with fruit, and we throw them in there, and I put some chia seeds or some kind of seed. But bottom line is, it's a NutriBullet shake every morning along with my cup of coffee. And this sameness actually leads to some form of saneness throughout the course of the day. Having that morning routine, having the same thing that I wear for eat for breakfast, having the same shirts that I kind of wear for very particular days based on my daily theme. So, for example, today's Tuesday, so I'm wearing, my shirt that embodies looking. So, likely video or things like that. Those are the shirts I wear. I've got a couple of shirts that kind of fit that mold. This is having some sameness in your life. That certainty helps you when things go awry throughout the day. Having those bookends, having those waypoints, having those anchors, the sameness that they involve and they allows you and kind of promotes saneness in your life. And that can't be undervalued, because the things that come at you from external sources, even from internal sources, the ideas that you want to bring to the fold, bottlenecks that either you are a part of or others are a part of, those are all things that can drive you nuts. Technology can drive you nuts. Traffic can drive you nuts. There's so many things that can just derail your day. And yet there are so many things that you have control over that are just seemingly so small and trivial, but they give you that sanity. The almost like it tethers you on to the reality of the day, the reality of time, the reality of your space. So that way, you can take a deep breath and go, okay, well, you know what? Yes, this went off the rails, but you know what? I know that at this point in time, I'm going to go for that 20-minute run. Every day at 2:00, I have my movement mode, so I'm going to do that. So having some sameness in your life creates saneness, and I think that you need to really, if you can, have several of those, depending on how crazy your life is. In fact, the more crazy your life is, the more you probably need some of those anchors. But put one in place today. Say, you know what, there's one element of or identify one and own it and embrace it. Because it's those things that are the same that will keep you sane when the things that aren't are going to just drive you nuts. That's it for your 3 minutes of time crafting. I'll see you later. This is your 3 minutes of time crafting for March 27th, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. So I live in a part of the world that is rainy, generally. We're now entering the season where there's not as much rain. Sun's starting to show up a bit more. In fact, as I'm recording this, it's beautiful outside. The cherry blossoms are out. But I know that an umbrella is going to be needed for, a good chunk of time during especially the fall and early spring and winter part of the year. Yes, because it does not snow up here very much in Victoria, British Columbia. But what's interesting about umbrellas is that you think about them and the first reaction for me is to think about rain. But if you live in a place that's incredibly sunny, then the first inclination you might have, the perspective you might have on an umbrella, is that it's actually used to shield you from the sun. It's the thing you take with you to the beach. When we were in Hawaii this past January, my family and I, we had an umbrella and we brought it to the beach with us because it was to help shield us from the sun because it was warm and we weren't the only ones that brought it to the beach. And why do I bring this up today? What is the lesson here? Well, the lesson here is all about perspective. It's all about the personal perspective that you have when it comes to not just umbrellas, but so many different things. The way you look at something is going to be completely different than the way somebody else looks at it. The way you use a tool will be completely different than the way that someone else uses it. I have a mechanical keyboard that I use. I use it only for long form writing. It could be used for so many different things. And I know lots of people that use their mechanical keyboards exclusively. But for me, it's the thing that sits on my analog writing desk, the writing desk that I use that I fold out. That's where that goes. And that's the use case for it. The keyboard could be used for so many different things. An umbrella could be used for so many different things. It could be used as a weapon, a fencing weapon. I've seen people do that. There's so many different things that you can take a tool and use it for. It's your choice in so many different ways. So I want you to think about perspective when you look at the tools you use, when you look at how you decipher an item on your to-do list and how somebody else would. Again, the way you look at energy levels versus the way someone else does, the way you look at your routine versus the way someone else does. Again, I think it's important to note that, the way you look at something is going to be different and the way you use something is going to be different. So when you're taking advice from people like me and others about how to do something or what to use something for, remember that you get to add your own ingredient to it as well and make it yours. That's it for your 3 minutes of time crafting for today. I'm Mike Vardy. I'll see you later. This is your 3 minutes of time crafting for March 28th, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. So one of the things that we struggle with, and I hear this a lot from people, is making things stick. Whether it's a habit or whether it's a theme, like you've got a monthly theme, which of course is, all this is related to habits and even routines, right? So how do we make things stick? How do we keep things from falling by the wayside? And there's really one thing that we tend to do, and I mean, I'm susceptible to this as well, is we tend to take on too much. We tend to do too many things in the same vein all at once. And as a result, they all fall apart. You can't make one stick, or there's a barrier, or you've come across some kind of struggle or an obstacle. And rather than, kind of pushing through the obstacle or recognizing it and working through it, you just kind of give up. Or you say it won't work because in this particular situation, it won't work. So therefore it must be flawed. But that's the flawed thinking there, is that every situation is unique. And yes, in some instances, the thing that you're trying to do may not be doable in one very specific, or maybe a few very specific situations. But if you're putting the right things in place, the right parameters in place with the idea of what's certain in your day, your week, your month, your whatever, then those moments, those instances should be few and far between. So I see this happening a lot with theming of days and theming of time. The way that you make those things stick is, first off, you really do the research on your day and on your weeks and figure out what you know to be true consistently so that you can work around that. And then secondly, don't do all of it at once. One of the big things that people try to do with time crafting is they try to do it all at once. And we see this with a lot of productivity methodologies, that if you don't do it all, then you're not doing it right. Time crafting doesn't work that way. You can say, I'm going to theme one day, and that's where you start. Or I'm going to, do one horizontal theme, or I'm not going to do daily themes. I'm just going to theme 1 month and see how it goes. So if you want to make things stick, start small. Start with something that's reasonable for you to do. And don't try to do 14 different things in one vein. And don't try to do everything in one vein. Pick one thing, start small, and then build upon that. That's how you make things stick. Get one thing to stick first and then add to that. That's it. That's your 3 minutes of time crafting for today. I'm Mike Vardy. I'll see you later. This is your 3 minutes of time crafting for March 29th, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. So sometimes your to-do list lies to you. Now, sometimes the reason it lies to you is because you have no intention of doing the things that are on it in the first place. You've just put them there as kind of not a reminder, but just this kind of thought or this expectation that you're going to actually do the thing that's on it. And that's a lie. That's lying to yourself. That's why I really like the idea of theming your time, because you can say, hey, you know what? I know that I'm not going to get all my audio recording done this Wednesday, even though it's listening day. So I'm just going to do the ones that I know I'm going to do, and then I'm going to move them to the next instance of that day, which would be the following Wednesday. So for example, I know that my to-do list would be lying to me if I said that I was going to do 2 weeks worth of podcasts for this particular daily podcast today. I don't do that. I don't create that false expectation. I try to do what's reasonable here. I try to make a reasonable to-do list that falls under these themes. And I say to myself, you know what? I don't want to deceive myself. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to record all of the episodes from the Thursday through to the following Wednesday. So that way, when the Wednesday shows up, I've just got a week's worth to do. Now, at some point, I want to get to the 2 weeks worth in advance of the daily podcast because I try to make these timeless. But right now, that's not reasonable. And I don't want to lie to myself. And I don't want to lie to put any kind of lies on my to-do list, because then I don't trust it. And when I don't trust it, then the whole framework starts to feel untrustworthy and things start to fall apart. So when you are looking at your to-do list, like, first off, ask yourself, are you really going to do those things that day? If not, put them on different days, whether you're using themes or otherwise. Secondly, also make sure that you're breaking down, your projects to their smallest particles. Make sure that those things are actually tasks and not projects. And if they are projects, break them down and spread them out over the course of several days or several weeks or whatever. Because to say, that today I'm going to write my book is not true. It's a lie, because I'm not going to write my book. I'm going to write 1,600 words for my book. I think that, again, having that specificity in there will really, really help. So there you go. Like, you want your to-do list to be something that you trust. And in order for you to trust it, you need to make sure that it isn't deceiving you. And the things that you put on it can deceive you if you're not careful. So again, be realistic and reasonable about what you can accomplish on any given day. And the way you do that is either by isolating the tasks so that they show up properly, or breaking them down so that you see the smallest increments. That's it for this episode of 3 Minutes of Time Crafting. I'm Mike Vardy. See you later. This is your 3 Minutes of Time Crafting for March 30th, 2019. I'm Mike Vardy. So I've been watching the Avengers trailers as the movie comes up. And yes, I know I try to make these episodes timeless, but let's face it. I mean, I know the date. I just announced it. So we're about a month away from that movie coming out. And one of the things that came up in the trailer was this idea of whatever it takes. And as soon as I saw the trailer, I thought to myself, wow, this has been one of my elements of time crafting for the past year, is this idea. It's one half of this annual axiom that I've come up with, which is kind of a new element of time crafting I've been playing with. And it's going to be something that I'm going to continue to kind of expand upon. And I think the key here is when you hear that term, whatever it takes, especially in the context of that trailer, and if you haven't seen it yet, you should definitely check it out. The idea that, you're willing to do anything, whatever it takes. But I don't think that when I look at it from my vantage point, that the whatever it takes is almost like I'm willing to sacrifice anything and everything. It's a very, very subjective which is, it's very personal. And you know how I am about productivity. If you've been listening to the show for a while, I believe productivity is personal. So the is personal. What I am willing to do, the that I am willing to do is going to be different than the that you are willing to do. And actually, it's funny, if you look at the way that the heroes are in the Avengers trailer, they're all unified on that front. Hey, whatever. They're that unified as a group. If you can get a group of people to make that consistent across the board, you're in a real great place. So if you're adopting a new productivity methodology or a new way of doing things in a company, if you can get that to be, kind of synchronized, then you're in a really good place. But even if you're not in a big group and it's for yourself, you need to figure out what your it is. Like, what are you willing to do? What is the it for you in whatever it takes? Are you willing to say no to things that because you want to make sure that the things you've said yes to get the attention they deserve? Are you willing to try, theming your time and that to see how it works? Is that your it? You've got to define that for yourself. And an annual axiom will help with that. But just, going back and journaling, walking through that process, I think is really, really key. So tomorrow I'm going to come with you with the second half of my annual axiom, because there is another element to it. But I wanted to focus on the whatever it takes today, because I want you to figure out whatever it takes for you to do something. What is your it? Figure that out and start there. I think it's a great place to start. That's it for your 3 minutes of time crafting. I'll see you later. This is your 3 minutes of time crafting for March 31st, 2019. I cannot believe that March ends today. We are literally one quarter through the calendar year. And I'm, I think more than halfway. I'm getting close. I mean, August is when mine ends. So I've got 5 months left. So this year is zooming by. And time moves by no matter what. That's why I don't like necessarily the term time management. It's more like you want to lead your time, because something that is moving, whether you like it to or not, and it kind of goes at its own pace. And for some people, it's going to be faster than others. That's not something you can manage, or you can just try to lead it and coax it. So I want to kind of lean back into this idea of no matter what, because that's the other half of my annual axiom. So yesterday I talked about whatever it takes. Now I'm talking about no matter what. So once you define that it, whatever that level of it is, and it's going, and the thing is that it might be fluid, it might be different under different circumstances, etc. Depending on work, maybe for work it's going to be one way, maybe for home it's going to be another. Hopefully there are some common ground and common values there. But the no matter what is almost like there's no compromise to it. I'm going to do whatever it takes, and nothing is going to stop me, no matter what. As opposed to the it in the first part of whatever it takes, which is subjective. The no matter what is it's rock solid. It's durable. It's like, no matter what, I'm going to do whatever it takes. That's why it's so key to really define what that it is for you, because there's no room for me. It's one of the few things in my annual axiom that has, no room for it's pretty rigid. It's actually probably the only rigid part of my entire time crafting methodology is the personal component of that to it, which is the no matter what. So when I'm looking at my day and I say, you know what, today is my listening day, and I'm going to adhere to that theme, because that's the it, no matter what. So it's funny, the whatever it takes is almost like the preamble, and then the no matter what is almost the qualifier. So when you're putting together some kind of mantra or phrase or slogan, or in this case, what I call the annual axiom, make it so that it's like, hey, this is the thing, and there's no question that this is going to happen. Make it virtuous, make it something that is so, that the integrity is there, and the integrity of the statement, is strong, because when you do that, then it's going to leave very little room for doubt, and you're going to be able to trust and be aware and clear, and all that stuff fits in. That's it for your 3 minutes of time crafting for today. I'm Mike Vardy. I'll see you later.